Hey guys,
Hi everybody.
welcome to another Sunday live video, Travel Therapy Mentor. Tonight we're going to be doing a Q&A. We announced this last week, and to be honest, I was afraid that we weren't going to get any questions or very few questions, and that turned out to be ridiculous because we got a ton of
100
questions.
Not really 100, but we got a lot of questions.
I think we got over 50 questions, but luckily some of those are similar, so hopefully we can get through it a little quickly. We'll just have to give brief answers, but we have a lot of questions to get through. So tonight we are coming to you live from the Netherlands, which is pretty exciting because the U.S. just played the Netherlands in the World Cup today, and we got to watch that here at a bar here, and we just had to be quiet with our with our.
Well, but see, when they won, of course we naturally had to stand up on the table and start chanting USA, USA.
No, we quietly left.
We quietly left and we went like this. So it was a good time, but it was kind of a letdown because the bar environment, everybody was just crickets and silence because the Netherlands lost and we won.
It was weird.
So, so like Jared said, we're coming at you live from the Netherlands, and we're going to be talking a little bit about just this Q&A tonight. We're going to go through the list of questions that we've got. If you guys have any follow-up questions about what we talk about, feel free to comment during the video. But again, we're going to try to keep it a little bit short if possible. Jared's going to share our video in a couple groups so that more people can join in on the conversation, and hopefully some of you guys will join in from our Facebook page and from our Instagram as well, where we got some questions. So just to give a brief introduction for anybody who is not familiar with us, my name is Whitney Aiken.
And I'm Jared Kazaza.
And we are both traveling physical therapists. Many of you might have tuned in with us in the past. We do weekly videos every week for Travel Therapy Mentor about various travel therapy topics. So a lot of the questions that we got, we've actually answered in previous videos. So this is going to be kind of just a mishmash of random topics, but usually every week we do our videos on a specific topic. So like a question we got was like about new grads doing travel therapy. We've done videos on that. A question about tax home, what's that? We've done a specific video about that, about insurance and using COBRA between contracts. We've done a video on benefits. So if you guys are watching this and you have more questions built off of our Q&A session today, we can link or point you in the direction to our other videos where we go in depth on one specific topic. We also probably have a lot of articles on a lot of these topics as well. For example, somebody asked about like student loan repayment options. We have an article on that. Asked about benefits and pay as a traveler. We have articles on that. So again, we have additional resources if today is just a little bit too much for you guys, but we thought it'd be a fun one to do, just a general Q&A, kind of like a quick rapid fire overview of a lot of topics, since usually our videos are very narrow into one small topic. So I see that a few of you guys are signing on already. If you would just leave us a comment and say hi and let us know that you're tuning in with us tonight. We'd love to know who's on. I see Ryan is on and Lauren is on. Hi guys. Jeff, hey, how's it going? Ryan's got a couple questions for us, most likely being silly as usual.
Looking like Ben Askren. Oh yeah.
I don't know who that is.
He lost the fight last night in UFC.
Oh, okay.
UFC fighter.
Okay, hi Jeff. So we'll get started here. I'm going to go down the list of some questions. I tried to group them into similar topics, but it's a little bit all over the place. So get ready for the ride here, talking about Q&A about travel therapy.
Yep, we're going to try to keep it brief, but
We usually never keep it brief.
Yeah, I mean, at least keep each answer brief, but if we don't cover something, feel free to ask us to clarify.
Okay, hi Lewis, thank you for joining us. Hi Aldwin. Aldwin says, how are you guys? We're good. We're tired though, to be quite honest. We walked like 14 miles today.
Yeah, we set a new record for our international trips. About 14 and a half miles, which I think the old record was like 13.8 or something like that. So
we walked a lot today, and some of that was on the beach in like sneakers, so that was an interesting experience, but we did get to see the sunset.
And the sunset at, it was like 10:15 here.
Yeah, so 10 p.m., but it was cool because we're on the, the west coast of Europe, so you get to see the west coast sunset, which was really neat. Let's jump in and we'll start with some questions. Like I said, if you guys have more questions that come up while you're watching. Or if anybody's watching on the replay, just comment #replay and let us know if you have follow-up questions, and we'll answer them later. Okay, so someone had asked us generally about the process of how you get licensed to be a travel therapist. So if you don't know, you have to be licensed in every individual state that you want to work as a physical therapist, occupational therapist, speech therapist, or assistant. So you have to have a license if you want to work in Virginia or you want to work in California or Hawaii. Now with the PT group, we have something called PT Compact that has started to get introduced. So for those people that are eligible for the PT Compact, and to be eligible, your home state has to be participating. Those people are starting to be able to just get one license, and then they'll be eligible to go get licensed other places.
Yeah, I think there's about 13 states that are part of the actually issuing licenses as the compact right now, but I'm not positive on that.
Yep, so you basically, in that case, you just have to get one license, and then you're eligible to go to these other states without going through as much paperwork and hassle as everybody else. But if you're not part of the PT Compact, if you're a physical therapist who is not eligible, or you're an OT or a speech therapist or an OT assistant, you have to do it the old-fashioned way. So you do have to get licensed in every state. Now the question specifically was, how do you go about like getting the licenses and the timing with your jobs?
So people give different answers on this. Experienced travelers give different answers, but I think that we think the best thing for you to do is to just get the license. Basically, if you have one or two states that you want to go to, get licensed in those one or two states, right? But if you have a bunch of states you want to go to, don't get licensed in all those up front, because what happened with us and what happens with a lot of travelers is you have a lot of states you want to go to, but then you change your mind as you go, or you end up deciding you don't want to go to those, or something happens. So I wouldn't recommend getting licensed in 6 or 7 states starting out like some people do. With that being said, I would recommend getting the license in a state before you apply for jobs in that state. So some travelers will actually apply for jobs before they get the license, and then have a job secured, and then hope that the license goes through in time. And I think that is a mistake, and I think a lot of people get burned on that and end up having to miss 1 or 2 weeks of work because their license doesn't go through. So I wouldn't apply for a lot up front. I would just do 1 or 2 starting out, and I would make sure to have the license before applying for jobs. Yep. Those are probably the 2 main things.
Yeah, and as far as how long the process is to get licensed in each state, it varies by state. But we do have a resource that we received from someone that has a list for the PTs. If you're interested in getting that list from us, that kind of breaks down how long it takes in each state. You can also consult with recruiters. They usually have a pretty good concept of, it's been taking my travelers 4 weeks in the state, but 2 months in this state. So like California is known for taking a long time. So if you want to get California, we recommend getting that well in advance. You don't want to start applying for jobs without having that license in hand, really, or being really close to having it done. Usually when you're first getting started with your first travel job, we honestly think it's the easiest just to go ahead and work in a state you're already licensed in, for example, your home state. And then while you're on that first contract, go ahead and start applying for the next license.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not only good for making sure that you have the license before you get the job or apply for jobs, but it's also good for saving some money, being close to home your first 1 or 2 contracts. That's what we did, and I think that made us a lot more confident having some money saved before we actually left our home state and got a little farther away.
Right. So another question that we had gotten was, are professionals outside the U.S. able to apply for travel therapy jobs? And this is a question that we get a lot, and I wanted to go ahead and address it because I mentioned that we're in the Netherlands, and a big question I keep forgetting to tell people in these videos or when I talk to them that we're in the Netherlands or we're in Europe just for fun right now. Yeah. We are not here as physical therapists. We're not here for work. So we get this question all the time. Is this thing that you're doing, can U.S. citizens work out of the country as travel therapists? And then we've even gotten a lot of emails and things from people from other countries. Like we got one the other day, I think from South Africa, wanting to know about which companies we work with and things because that person wanted to come to the U.S. or go to Europe or that sort of thing to work. So just to clarify, we actually have no experience with this.
Yeah, it's a lot more rare for physical therapists or for any therapy jobs to take assignments outside of the country. It does happen, and there's some companies that we've seen job listings through, but there's a lot more hassle that goes through that. or goes along with that. So a company is a lot less likely to want to wait for someone to get licensed or in a whole nother country. So we don't know all the process with each country. So when we're talking about travel therapy, we're only talking about in the 50 states.
And we're talking about
Puerto
U.S.
Rico.
citizens working, because I have no idea the rules of the person who asked the question. I think was a professional who is from outside the U.S. We have no idea the rules for Australia and New Zealand and South Africa and the U.K. and all that stuff. We have no idea. So I think it's possible, but I think it's completely different from what we do and what we do in our community here. We're talking about U.S. travel therapy. It's completely different as far as the companies that you work with, the recruiters that we work with, all of that.
And usually they're a lot longer contracts than 3 months, because if a company is going to hire you to come all the way to a different country, not only do they want you to stay longer, but you would want to stay longer because it's expensive to get there. And I mean, you have to, you would just probably take a suitcase and you would have to get a furnished place and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're going to want to stay longer, probably 6 months to a year, and the company's going to want you to stay longer. So it's not the short-term travel contracts that we're doing in the U.S.
Yeah, but we have heard of therapists in the U.S. taking jobs. We know one OT who she worked in Australia, I think. So we are actually interested in learning more about it so we can educate you guys more about it. So hopefully in the future we'll be able to bring you more information on that. I heard, isn't it TravCon this year? There will be a company there from Australia. Yeah, from an Australia travel company. So hopefully in the coming months we'll be able to tell you guys more about that. But as of now, we don't really have experience. We're just traveling abroad for fun, not for
And that's
work.
really not something that we're interested in or anything we'll ever pursue, just because, we want to travel for leisure. We want to explore while we're traveling, not work while we're traveling. So we make money in the U.S. and then travel for leisure the rest of the year.
Yeah. Okay, so this leads us to another question. That's a huge question that we got multiple times. We get multiple times every week, and then we got multiple times in preparation for this Q&A. And that is, which companies do you guys work with? So we actually, through our 4 years of being travel therapists, have interviewed or talked to several different recruiters at several different companies.
At least a dozen.
Yeah, at least a dozen different companies and a few different recruiters within different companies.
And there's over 100 out there, so the dozen is just scratching the surface.
Yeah, there's a lot. So if you ask any traveler, they're going to give you a different answer on which is the best company to work with. We do have a few, about 6 or 7, that we really like and we work with actively and talk to on a regular basis and recommend to others. So if you are interested in finding out our personal recommendations, we don't like to share that on our live videos, but if you want to comment on the video and just say company or recruiter, we can message you afterwards and talk to you about which ones that we like and why. Because the big thing is not all companies are the same and not all companies are for each person.
Yeah. So, we'll get the question, what's the best company or what's the worst company? And there is no best or worst company. It just depends on what you want and what the company can provide. And then it also depends on your recruiter at the company. So there's many variables. You can be at a company that we don't like, but have a great recruiter, and maybe that's fine with you. Or you can be at a company that we love, but have a bad recruiter. And we hear about that all the time. So there's no way you can give one answer there.
Yeah, so the best thing we like to do is, if you guys want to message us directly or comment on the video and we can message you directly, we like to have a conversation, and we'll ask you, what, are you a student? Are you a new grad? Are you an experienced clinician? Where are you looking to go?
Are there certain states? Yeah, because there's certain companies that specialize in certain areas, which is awesome. So if you don't know about those companies, you're just working with national companies, then your options will be more limited.
Yeah. Are you more concerned with just seeing the highest paycheck possible, or are you more concerned with somebody who's going to mentor you and, hold your hand a little bit through the process and help you understand it and maybe put you in some new grad friendly facilities? Or are you more interested in, I don't care how much I get paid, I just only want to work in SNFs or only want to work in outpatient? So it's important for us to know these things so that we can help you decide, we have these recruiters and we like them for these reasons, and I think that they would be well suited for you for those reasons.
Yeah, it's a lot better if we can match you up with somebody than just giving blanket recommendations.
Right. Absolutely. So that's kind of our 2 cents on which travel company to choose. So somebody else asked, how can you tell the difference between a good and bad company, and what are some things that you should look for in a travel company or a recruiter to know that?
I would say the best thing to do is go by reviews. So you can reach out to experienced travelers and ask them for advice. You can Google the company name. And on things like Indeed and Glassdoor and things like that. There'll be reviews for the company, so that's always a good place to go. Look for other travelers. Usually you only post your bad experiences on there, but if you see 1,000 bad experiences, that's probably not a good company to work with. As far as recruiters, the best thing you can do is just talk to them on the phone, send some emails back and forth, see how responsive they are, see how well your personalities match, because we've had situations where we really like a recruiter and we refer them to someone and that person doesn't like them. Or we've had a situation where the same happened to us. Someone referred us to a recruiter that we didn't really get along well with. So it's really hard because everyone has a different personality, and not all personalities go together. So talk to them on the phone, make sure they're responsive. That's probably the most important thing, and helpful, because you want someone, if there's ever an issue at a contract, you want someone that gets back to you quick, because those situations, when you're in it, seems like an eternity. It seems like a life or death situation. You want to get it resolved as quickly as possible if something comes up. So you want someone that will get back to you quickly, and you're not just sitting around staring at the phone.
And as far as what to look for in a company itself, that's going to depend on you and depend on what you're looking for in the company, which is kind of where we can help steer you in the right direction. So we know certain companies that we work with have insurance that start on day one, which is really important to some people. Some companies allow you to start contributing to a 401k right away if that's something you're interested in. Some companies we know offer a little higher pay across the board than other companies because maybe they're a smaller company and they have less overhead, so they have more money to put in your pocket. Some companies offer mentorship programs. Some companies offer, what else? CEU reimbursement, certain things like that. So it just depends on what you're looking for. So we do have an article. If you have specific questions and that didn't answer it fully, we do have an article that kind of lists like a list of things to go through and ask a recruiter, and a list of things to go through and ask a company that might be helpful to answer that question further. Another question about recruiters is, do we as a couple, or if you're traveling as a pair with your significant other or your friend, do you work with the same recruiters?
Most of the time we do, if possible. But we are always talking to multiple recruiters when we're looking for jobs, because we want to have as many job options in the area we're trying to go to as possible. So if something happens where one company and one recruiter has a job that works for Whitney, and then another recruiter company has a job that works for me, we'll go through different companies. But ideally, we want to go through the same recruiter, right. Same company.
But as far as like working with them, we're always working with the same ones.
Yeah.
So we might be working with 4, but we're both working with the same 4. So the each one knows that we're a pair, yeah. And we're a package deal. And even if recruiter A knows that, and they can only they'll say like, I have one job in, Washington, D.C., and then they know that maybe Jared will take a job with a different recruiter if they have a matching job like nearby. So you're always kind of in communication with the same group of recruiters, and they should always know that you are a package deal. And if they can't find you a pair job, or they don't have one job and it matches with somebody else's, that you might not be able to go with them, and they should be totally fine with that.
Yep.
Okay. Another question was, when in this process should you start contacting recruiters? Specifically, the person who was asking the question was talking about if you were going to be doing it right after graduation.
Usually, so we started probably about 5 or 6 months before graduation, but that was a little too long in advance, I would say. So I would say, ideally, probably 3 to 4 months before. Start talking to recruiters and building a relationship. Find someone you like. Start filling out the paperwork so that right when you graduate and you're looking for jobs, you're not like scrambling to get pre-enrollment paperwork or pre-hire paperwork, getting all that stuff done. So it's better to have all that done a couple months in advance, so that then when you graduate and you're starting to look for jobs, all you have to do is be submitted for the job, and you don't have to go through all that. Right. All that other stuff.
Yeah, so like Jared said, I think 3 to 4 months before you would reasonably be thinking about starting to work. So if you are a May graduate and you want to start working June, 3 to 4 months before that. Or if you're a current clinician and come January is when I'm going to want to start, because I'm going to put in my notice at my job, or I'm going to move to a new town or whatever. 3 to 4 months before you anticipate starting. And then you really want to have it narrowed down. Like, this is when you would start talking to a couple of different recruiters and kind of like interviewing them and getting to know them and deciding who you'd want to work with. And then at least, I'd say 8 weeks, so 2 months before you're ready to start, is when you should be having it narrowed down and have a profile filled out with each company because they need this in order to submit you for jobs. Otherwise, when your start date rolls around, or that 4 to 6 week mark is when the jobs will start showing up for your time frame, and you want to be submitted, you want your application submitted, they can't submit your application if they don't have your profile.
Yep.
Yeah. So I see a couple other people have joined on. If you have joined on, just say hey and let us know you're here. Again, if you have any questions that come up during the live Q&A, you can feel free to ask some more questions. But we have a list that we got earlier that we're going to go through.
We still have about 20 to go through, so we got to speed up a little bit.
Okay, so we want to address the, is it a good idea to start working as a travel therapist as a new grad, or should I get experience first?
This depends completely on you as a clinician or you as a student. How comfortable are you in your last clinical is what we always tell people. So if you're very comfortable in your last clinical, you feel like you're independent with everything, then you'll probably be fine jumping into travel. It also depends on your personality. So are you someone that is able to adapt quickly to new environments, or is that something you struggle with? How quickly do you learn new things, like as far as documentations at your clinicals? Was it easy for you to pick up the documentation system? So all those things are something that you should consider. So for both Whitney and I, we started as new grads, and we had pretty good experiences with it, but we've also talked to other travelers that started as new grads and did not have good experiences. So it's completely an individual thing. One thing that I think is very important for someone considering travel as a new grad is to take your time and find a almost ideal job for the first one. So even if you have to take some time off after graduation when you're looking, a couple weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I would do that to make sure that you have the best fitting job for you on your first contract, to make sure that goes smoothly. Because once that one's out of the way, everything else is easy. So get the first one out of the way, make sure it's a good fit for you, make sure they're willing to help you if you feel like you need that, that it's good pay, it's a location somewhere that you want, and so hopefully that helps.
Right, and having a great recruiter helps with this, because you really want to have somebody who's in your corner and is going to help push you in a supportive environment for your first job. Somewhere that you're going to have, a little bit of mentorship, hopefully someone else there of your same discipline, so another PT or another OT, another speech therapist there to help you if you have questions. But someone who's not going to try to just push you into a job just to land a job, or just to land a place for themselves. So this is where having a good recruiter, someone who's going to help with that mentorship factor. But some people it's not right for them. And so some people have had a lot of better success by working for a year before they start. So it's really very individual. Like Jared said, we had a great experience, and we would recommend it if you feel like it's right for you, but you have to ask yourself a lot of questions.
Yep.
Okay, so do you have advice for students that want to do travel PT after graduation? So kind of the same thing Jared said, just make sure that you learn as much as you can, curriculum-wise, learn as much as you can about and grow your skill set so you'll feel very independent. Let your CIs know, your clinical instructors know in your last couple of field work placements or internships, clinicals, let them know. I let them know when I was in my last 2 of my 3rd year PT school that, hey, I need to feel pretty independent by the time this is over, so that way they won't hold your hand as much, and they'll loosen up the reins and let you gain your independence more. And then, of course, learn as much as you can about travel therapy and the travel therapy world leading up to your 3rd year.
Yeah, and one thing I'd add to that is try to get experiences in as many different settings as you're able to, because it's really nice to be a traveler that has experience in multiple settings, so that if you say you really want to go to a certain area and all that's available there is home health, if you don't have any home health experience, you can do it, but it might be a little more scary than if you had a clinical in home health. So, if you're dead set on going to a certain area, you want to have the most options available to you, which means that you need experience in multiple settings. So try to get as much experience as you can in different settings as a student.
Right. And a pretty similar question someone had asked, do you have any advice for a new grad who's going into their very first job, and their very first job is going to be a travel job? So this is kind of the essence of what it is to be a new grad traveler. A lot of us who are new grad travelers, that means our very first job as a clinician was as a traveler, and that was the case for Jared and I. Mm-hmm. So again, kind of like we mentioned, having a really ideal first placement is hopefully a setting that you're very comfortable in. We generally recommend that new grads don't take home health as their first job and don't take SNF as their first job. And this is more so for PT. It might be a little bit different for OT and speech. But we feel like those are pretty tough environments as a new grad to take for your very first job. Ideally, I would say more of like an inpatient acute, an inpatient rehab, or like a outpatient for a PT specifically would be a better transition. But it depends on your experience. If you had a really great experience in a SNF, go for it. But yeah, and then also just being confident in yourself. Don't let anyone walk on you. Don't let them encourage you to work off the clock because maybe you're a little slow, because maybe, you know, there's a big learning curve. This is your first job and it's a new place and they're expecting you to hit the ground running. Gosh, we have horror stories about, especially about my first job, how I was definitely worked really hard and my productivity was super low, and they were expecting me to work off the clock and it was terrible. So just don't be bullied into that stuff. Know your worth, and you know, but hopefully get put into a good first placement.
Yeah, and realize that everyone's nervous, especially on the very first travel job. For anyone as a traveler, whether you have experience or not, but as a new grad, especially so. So it's normal to be nervous. It's normal to struggle a little bit the first couple weeks. Getting adjusted to everything, getting adjusted to being an autonomous clinician is difficult. So expect to be nervous and expect to have some jitters, but that's normal.
Okay. So I have a silly question that came to us that says, how can I find a lady to travel with? So this person was asking us, how could he find a partner in crime to travel with? Maybe he was just wanting to be like us.
Well, it helps to be really ridiculously good looking, I would say. I would say the best way or the easiest way is to find someone while you're a student, like someone in your class, or doing networking with other schools, finding a student or someone there that would be interested in travel or whatever. But you can also do it on Facebook groups. Like, there are people that travel together that aren't in a relationship, that are just friends that travel together. So you can reach out to people in travel therapy Facebook groups and try to find someone to travel with, whether that's romantic traveling together or not.
Yeah, but generally the couples that we know that travel together maybe met in PT school or in therapy school, or they were already significant others, or that sort of thing. So they're typically, your typical travel couple is going to be a pair of therapists, or a therapist and a nurse that have the ability. But there are a lot of people that travel with a significant other who is not a healthcare professional. So it is possible, and you can find love, and hopefully your significant other or your friend has a flexible job that they can also travel with and go on the road with you.
Yeah, Josie, reach out on some of the Facebook groups. You can definitely find people to travel with.
Ryan says, can we see you kiss? You're so weird. Okay, real quick, I think Lauren had a question that was a offshoot of a different question about...
Lauren said, when you're at one contract and looking for your next, do you typically start looking 4 to 6 weeks before or earlier? We start looking, first, as long as the contract's good, we will try to extend it. As long as we're happy with it, we're getting paid well, it's an area that we like. So probably somewhere 4 or 5 weeks in, you're going to know that stuff. So you'll start feeling out whether they might want you to extend. So that we'll start doing that around then. If that's an option, then that's always going to be our first choice if we like the place. If it's not an option, then around probably 6 weeks before, 6 or 7 weeks before, we'll start looking, knowing that probably there won't be any jobs that are available for that 6 or 7 weeks out time frame that we need. But we'll still look just in case. But normally we're finding contracts within the last 4 weeks before the next job starts. So that last 4 weeks is when almost everything always happens. But occasionally you'll get lucky and get it secured before then, which is usually a relief, because then you don't have to spend, you're not worried for the last few weeks that you're not going to find a job. So the farther in advance you can start looking, the better.
Okay. So this has never happened during a video before, but I had to pee. So I'm going to leave Jared alone for a second. So I'll be right back.
All right. Hey, Ryan, thanks for joining. Okay. Sick days as a traveler. Someone asked about that. So we have never taken a sick day as a traveler, but we did have a situation where Whitney's mom was, or Whitney's grandmother was sick, and she had to take time off. And because of that, she ended up missing, I think, 1 or 2 days. And, I mean, things happen, and the facility understands that. So usually you'll contact your manager at the facility and tell them, hey, this is going on. I'm not going to be able to come in today. I'm not feeling well or whatever. But you don't get any kind of sick pay. So that's something to always be aware of. So, a permanent employee would get paid usually, or they'd have maybe 5 or 6 sick days per year or something like that. But as a traveler, you're not getting paid for those sick days. So if you call in sick, then you're not getting that pay. But I mean, things always happen. You can definitely call in if you need to. Liability insurance. Do we get liability insurance? So the travel companies almost always have liability insurance for us. So we have never gotten our own individual liability insurance, but we do know of travelers that do that. It's usually very cheap. There's not much reason not to do it. We probably should. I think it's maybe $100 per year or less, so you might as well. And I know there's tons of companies out there that you can get quotes through, so I don't really see any reason not to. You might as well.
Okay, I'm back. What did I miss?
We did sick days, liability insurance.
Okay, cool. So you want to keep going this way, or you want to start up here?
Doesn't matter.
Okay, so someone had asked tips on negotiating a contract. And this is kind of like a sort of a complicated question. Tips on negotiating a contract, understanding your worth, and like how much you should make. So this is sort of talking about negotiating pay, more or less.
Yeah, this is very difficult. It's something that we still struggle with. It's harder if you're in a situation where your options are limited. So as a couple, Whitney and I, our options are usually limited for a certain area that we want to go to, especially with the start date exactly what we want, and we're usually looking for outpatient. So if we find 2 jobs in the location that we want that are outpatient on the start date that we want, we are very limited there. So our negotiating can't be too what would you say?
Aggressive?
Too aggressive. So we have to be careful. We'll try to negotiate some. We usually will be able to increase the pay a little bit, but we can't try to hold out like a single traveler might be able to with a lot of options. We can't be like, okay, if I can't get this much, I'm not taking the job. But if you're flexible as a single traveler and you're willing to let the jobs go, if they want to increase the rate, then you can negotiate, you can play hardball for sure. But you have to realize that when you do that, you're going to miss out on some jobs because you'll say, okay, I'll take this, but I'll only take it for this amount of pay. Well, sometimes they'll be able to do it, sometimes they won't. So you have to be willing to let that job go. But that being said, sometimes they'll be able to increase $50 or $60 a week, and you don't have to do a whole lot of hard negotiation or anything like that.
Yeah. So it's tricky when you talk about negotiation as a traveler, because ideally you get recruiters that were recommended to you that are good recruiters and they're honest, and they're going to try to give you the best pay they possibly can for each job. So we've gotten to know our recruiters so well that sometimes they'll even tell us, this is the bill rate, which the bill rate is a whole other conversation, but the bill rate is basically how much the facility will pay the travel company, and then that's how much money the travel company has to work with, so they can then pay us after they take out their operating costs and that sort of thing. So we have some recruiters that are so transparent with us that they'll just be like, look, here's the numbers, this is how much money we're getting paid, and then I have to take out this for operating costs, and so this is how much I can pay you. And they might say, I can give you this much more, but not a lot more. So hopefully you get to that point with recruiters to where you really trust them, that they're not trying to take advantage of you, and they're really giving you the best pay as possible without you even having to negotiate. So that's the best thing. But when you're first starting, it's hard to know that. So I think the best thing to do is have a ballpark figure in your mind. And so from our experience, the ballpark figure we always recommend for PT, OT, and speech therapists is about $1,500 as a minimum, and this is a weekly take-home number after taxes. So you have that to kind of go off of. Now, you should know that if the job is in a lower cost of living area, maybe $1,500 is about right. If it's a high cost of living area, like you're looking for a job in San Francisco, you should be raising that number. You shouldn't take $1,500. You should be looking at $1,700, $1,800 plus. If it is a home health job, it should be higher as well. These numbers are different. The baseline for a PTA or a CODA might be somewhere around $1,000, $1,100, $1,200 would be kind of your ballpark.
Yeah.
So I think having a ballpark in mind is the best thing. So then later, when you want to do your negotiations or whatever, you kind of have to have a number to throw out there. So say, what's this job paying? And then tell them, they say 17 and you say, well, I was hoping for 1850 or whatever, and just sort of know, and you get to know the idea with experience of whether or not that's enough for that area. Or you can ask people on Facebook. There's a big community of people that you can say, hey, is this reasonable for this area?
In the beginning, you're not going to have much idea whether you're being taken advantage of or not, and we find that a lot with new grad travelers that are getting taken advantage of. So yeah, I would say the best thing you can do, since you never know if the recruiter's actually being honest with you about like, oh, well, I can only give you $1,300 for this job, but in reality they might be able to pay $1,800. You just don't know. You can't know what the facility is giving the recruiter unless they voluntarily give you the information, which is not very common. So the best thing you can do is reach out to experienced travelers and say, hey, I'm getting this offer. Does that seem about right for this area, this setting, whatever? Because, I mean, we can't really give a blanket number because outpatient in Virginia and home health in Alabama or skilled nursing in California, like all those things are going to be different. So
yeah.
It will vary.
It's important to point out here too that some travel companies would pay a different amount for even the same job or the same type of job in the same area. So this is why it's important for you as a traveler to work with multiple recruiters so you can learn, okay, this company tends to pay on the lower end, but there might be other reasons that you like working with that company, even though it does tend to pay on the lower end.
Yep.
Like we have one company we work with that we know pays a little on the lower end, but the recruiter is just phenomenal. She's the best recruiter we've ever worked with, and she works so hard to try to find placements. So I'm like, if
and the benefits are very good as well.
Yeah, and so it's like, even though the pay is a little lower, you're getting these other perks. Whereas there's some people that have the pay higher, or there's some people that have the pay kind of in the middle of the road. But maybe they have a big variety of jobs, which is important to us as a pair. So we know, okay, if there was just one of us, yeah, we could be making $2,000 a week, but that's just one job. This company has a ton of jobs across the board, and they can always place us together.
Yep.
So there's just a lot of factors that go into figuring out the pay.
Yep.
But working with multiple recruiters will help you understand like the pay for a certain area. So if you're looking for a job specifically in Dallas, Texas, and 3 different recruiters present you with 3 different jobs, then you can kind of get a ballpark of like, why does this one say $1,400 but this one says $1,800, and get a feel for what the pay should be in that area. Now another part that goes into this is how to understand like, should you be getting reimbursements? So you have to look at the pay package as a whole. Some companies and some recruiters will just pay you just a weekly amount, whereas other people will pay you a weekly pay plus reimbursements on top of that. So if you're comparing one pay package offer from one company, Company A, to the pay package offer from Company B, you need to look at it as a whole. Like, for example, if one of them is paying you $1,600 a week with no reimbursements, and one of them is paying you $1,500 a week plus a $500 relocation reimbursement plus a $500 license reimbursement, then you would take that extra $1,000 and divide it over however many weeks the contract is and add that to the weekly to then compare it on a weekly basis.
Yep. You have to think about it in terms of how much money is the travel company getting from the facility. So, say for an easy example, say the bill rate is $50 an hour, you're working 40 hours a week, that's $2,000 a week gross that the travel company is getting. And then multiply that by 13 weeks, the contract length. There's $26,000 basically that the travel company would have to work with in this hypothetical scenario. So $50 an hour bill rate is usually pretty low. You probably won't find that many. It's usually 55 and up, but just for easy numbers. So $26,000 is how much they have. Of that, they have to keep money to pay their employees for their overhead, for their profit, and then the rest is what you get. So say out of that $26,000, say $18,000 is actually what you can get over that 13-week contract. And then how is that split up? So it could be all weekly pay, it could be weekly pay plus reimbursements, but the point is that there's still that same amount of money no matter how they split it. It just depends on how you want it split or how the company does it.
Mm-hmm. And the best thing to do is just ask. Like, when you're first learning and you're first getting the gist of things, hopefully you have an honest recruiter and a helpful recruiter, and just say, is there any more money in the bill rate or in the pay package that you can offer me? Is there any way that you can add on a reimbursement in addition to this quote that you've already given me for the weekly pay, is there any way to add on a reimbursement for this license I had to pay for? Because like the licensing for California is what?
It's expensive.
It's $500 or something.
Yeah.
Is there any way you can pay for any of the relocation fees for me driving from my home state to there, or that sort of thing? And then some recruiters will say, no, this is all the money I can give you is what I've already told you. If you want me to then break up that money and take it away and put it into reimbursements because you want some of it up front, I could do that. But no, this is like the maximum amount I can give you as a whole. Whereas others will come back and say, like for example, there are certain companies we work with that have different departments that have different budgets. And they're like, oh yeah, I can pull a little bit of the licensing money from the license department that I could not put on your weekly and give you this separate license reimbursement. So you just have to ask.
It depends on how the company's set up and different situations. But yeah, definitely ask. Don't be afraid to ask your recruiter those hard questions, because they're used to it. That's their job. So
yeah. Okay. What else should you look for on your contract besides the pay?
Start and end dates. Make sure that those are correct, because it's pretty not common, but it happens where those aren't right. So make sure that's correct. The dates that you actually want. Look for any dates that you need off. Have that written for whatever reason. Weddings, birthdays, whatever, holidays. You want to have hopefully a 40-hour guarantee, meaning that even if the census is low and they don't have 40 hours worth of work for you, you still will get paid for 40 hours. And then hopefully a 30-day cancellation notice, so that if they hire somebody permanent or something like that and they don't need you anymore, or say the caseload's just low and they don't need a traveler, they have to give you at least 30 days. So you get paid for at least those 30 days while you find a new job. So those are probably the big things.
Yeah. And I think we also have an article on that one as well.
We did an article. I think we did a video on that too.
Yep. Okay. Have you ever used the mentorship provided by the travel companies? And what is that like? So mentorship comes in different forms. So one type of mentorship we already talked about. Well, one type of mentorship is us. Hi.
Yeah.
Travel therapy mentor.
True.
Speaking of which, I just did a thumbs up. If you guys are watching this and you are gaining any information from it, we would appreciate it if you would give us a thumbs up or a heart, or leave us a comment, or write us a review, or all those.
Tag a friend.
All those things that people say.
Yeah.
We would appreciate if you just show us some love. So anyway, mentorship comes in lots of different forms. The big way that you can get mentorship is by being placed in a new grad-friendly facility, which just means that there's someone there that you can talk to. You're not just hung out to dry. Another way that you can get mentorship is directly through the travel company, which is what this question was about. So quite often they'll provide someone by phone that can mentor you. Sometimes that's a current or a previous traveler. So they've been in your same shoes. Maybe it's a PT or an OT or a speech therapist that's also a travel therapist that you can just talk to and get advice from if you're in a tricky situation. Maybe it's a clinical liaison, which is someone who's not necessarily a travel therapist, but it could just be like an experienced person, professional from your same discipline to help you with like a clinical type question. So yes, we have used the clinical liaisons before, and it happened once or twice, I think, because we were working at SNFs and they were mad about our productivity and they wanted us to speak to the clinical liaison to see if there was anything. Basically, they could help us problem solve and figure out what it is about the facility that's making us not able to meet our productivity requirements.
Yeah, and if there's any way that they could advise the manager of the facility to make things more streamlined so that we could have higher productivity, which was actually helpful.
Yeah, and they gave us some advice and some tips from their experience. So that was helpful.
Yeah.
We never have worked with a mentor that was a fellow travel therapist. We never received mentorship in that way formally through the travel company, but we have learned a lot along the way from just other travel therapists in these online communities.
For sure.
Okay, so talking about the housing stipend that you receive. So this was a question about if you work as a pair or you travel as a pair, do you both get the housing stipend and then have extra money left over because you really only need one housing stipend?
Yes, I think every company that I know of, if you travel as a pair, even if you're married, you would both get the housing stipend. The only situation where you'd run into issues is if one of you takes the company provided housing and the other one takes the housing stipend. And I think that's probably only if you're married. Like, so a married couple traveling together and one of you takes like company provided housing, so they put you in an apartment, and then the other one takes the housing stipend. Obviously, you're staying together in that apartment. So I think that's the only time that there's issues, and that's only with certain companies. They wouldn't. Certain companies have rules against that where they won't let you do it.
Yeah.
But
I
if
feel
you're
like
both taking the stipend, I think that's almost always fine.
I feel like if you were taking, I don't know for sure, but if you were taking it with 2 different companies, would they still pay you the stipend? Like if you took a job with one company and you took the housing, and I took a job with another company.
If you're working through two different companies, then I would imagine it wouldn't be a problem because they don't know what the other company's doing or what you're taking from the other company or whatever. But if you're working with the same company, there could be an issue there. But definitely, if you have any questions about that, either ask the recruiter or ask a tax advisor would be a good person to talk to about that.
But generally, we get pay just as an individual. So I'm an individual.
So we both get housing stipends.
That is just an employee or a healthcare professional, and so I get my own pay, my own stipend, my own everything, regardless of whether I was traveling with a partner or not. And so yes, it actually does help you save a lot of money because then we pretty much we use barely any percent of the stipend because we lived in the camper for a while, so we were just using a small portion of the stipend for housing, and then you save the rest.
Which is why we're able to travel for 4 months right now.
Out of the country, not working. Okay. I'm gonna skip that one for now. So, somebody asked, do either of us have a specialty, and if so, what is the process to be specialized as a PT or a therapist? So neither of us per se have a specialty, so we haven't taken any advanced certifications, OCS or anything like that. We do tend to prefer outpatient jobs, so we have tended to try to take outpatient jobs if possible, but we don't necessarily specialize. Yeah,
I've done a lot of independent study on orthopedics and stuff, but the thing that's really keeping me from taking the exam is the cost. I mean, I can't justify, I think it would be like $1,000 after everything or more than that for taking the exam when I can just study the stuff on my own. I don't really, if there was a higher pay offered for it, I would do it, but I don't see the value of it right now.
Yeah. So as far as if you wanted to become specialized, it depends on what you mean. So you could take a specialty certification. So for PTs, there's like the geriatric one, the sports one, the orthopedic specialty. I know there's other specialty areas for OTs and speech therapists. So if you wanted to take higher certification to get those specialties, you could. However, there is also just the good old-fashioned experience. So for example, certain people specialize in pediatrics, but they don't necessarily have like a higher certification for pediatrics. They just took their clinicals in pediatrics, took their first couple jobs in pediatrics, gained that experience. So then they are eligible to take these pediatric jobs, whereas we have 0 days of experience in clinicals or jobs. So we would never take a pediatrics job, and we would never be eligible to take a pediatrics job just because we had no experience. And I'm
There's something with the hours too. So you have to have a certain number of hours in the last few years working in that specific setting when you're applying to take one of the exams. But it doesn't matter if you're a traveler or a permanent therapist. You would still have proof that you had that.
Yeah, but I was thinking this question was more along the lines of like if you specialize, like, oh, I'm this type of therapist or I'm this type of travel therapist. So that could be the case, like especially more with like speech therapists. I mean, obviously, I think I won't claim to know a lot about speech therapy, but there's a lot that are more like the swallowing specialists, and so you'd work more in like the adult settings, neuro settings, that kind of stuff, versus like a pediatric speech language pathologist who's working with, those are totally different things.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think you have to have like specialty certifications necessarily. I think it's more in what you gain your experience in.
Yeah, what you're comfortable in, what the facilities willing to hire you with, so we see job listings sometimes that'll be like it's a home health job, but you have to have at least 2 years of home health experience, so we're not eligible for those. But some jobs are willing to accept anyone that's willing to try in that setting. So so it just depends on the job too. Like we've even been offered some that were outpatient, that were like general outpatient but had a little bit of pediatrics, and they actually would have considered us because it wasn't really like developmental delay and stuff. It was more just like general peds. So, we could have maybe gotten our foot in the door with a little bit of peds. So it just kind of depends on the job. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about health insurance. I think you touched on health insurance a little bit before, or were you talking about liability insurance?
Liability.
Okay. So health insurance, in general, is going to be provided by the travel therapy company. If you're working through a travel therapy company, you are an employee of theirs while you're on contract, and you would be on their health insurance.
Yep, you're eligible for the same benefits as their permanent staff. So the recruiters and payroll and managers and all those people that have benefits through that company, you'd be eligible for the same benefits.
Yep. And then the question was, have you guys ever taken COBRA between jobs, or have any recommendations on that?
We haven't taken COBRA. I wrote an article about using COBRA. The great thing about COBRA is that you only have to sign up for it if you actually needed it. So it's retroactive, which means that, say we had 3 weeks off between assignments, we switched companies during that time, so we're uncovered for that 3 weeks. What we do is we would go through that 3 weeks. If we had any medical issues come up, then we would sign up for it afterwards and have it applied retroactively so that those things would be covered. If we don't need it during those 3 weeks, then we just don't worry about it, and just take that 3 week lapse in coverage, knowing that we were semi-protected, or we were really protected during that time by the eligibility for COBRA. So that's how we use it. We've never actually had to sign up. We just, if we have those breaks in contracts, we just don't schedule any appointments. We've never had any emergencies, so we've been eligible. We haven't taken it.
And the other thing is, if you take your next job, so say you're working with one company and you only take 2 weeks off, and then you take your next job immediately after that 2 week break with the same company, your insurance should carry over during that 2 weeks, but you'd have to take, under most circumstances, your next job within usually 30 days or 25 days with the same company. If you switched companies for the next contract, then you would have a lapse in insurance. Let's see. Josie has a question for us.
Can you take extra money if you don't accept the health insurance? So some companies will offer that because, obviously it costs them to pay part of the insurance on your behalf. So some companies will actually say, this is the amount you'll make per week if you take health insurance. This is the amount you'll make per week if you don't take health insurance. Some companies don't do that. And I've heard from some companies that it's not legal to do that, but I don't know for sure if it is legal or not. I'm sure on your end, if they offer you more money and you don't need the health insurance, I would take it. But I don't know if it's legal on their end to offer that to you.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. We don't know for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, if you don't need health insurance, definitely try to get more money. I would tell the recruiter, like, hey, how much could I make more if I don't take the health insurance? And maybe they'll be able to, maybe they won't, but
yeah,
it's worth a shot.
Ask. Okay, a question we got was, have you guys ever ended a contract early, and are there any penalties for doing this? So we've never really ended a contract early. One time we were working in contract and we extended, and then we were going to extend again, and then something came up and we were like, never mind, we're just not going to extend again. We'll just make
basically they tried to change the terms of the contract, so we just decided we weren't going to do it. And so no, we've really never canceled a contract.
We have had, my contract was canceled on me once, but they gave me a 30-day notice, and I worked the full 30-day notice, and everything was fine. I was able to secure another contract in the meantime.
That started the next week, and everything worked out perfectly.
But as far as consequences, if you need to end a contract early, it sort of depends on your reasoning. In our opinion, we don't know any clear-cut guidelines on this. I think it's very much up to interpretation.
Yeah, it's depending on the individual situation. Like, if you're in a terrible place and your recruiter knows that you're in a terrible place, and things are being done unethically there, and no one's going to fault you for that. But if it's a situation where, say, your friend's going on a trip that's a month long and it's right in the middle of your contract and you end it early because of that, then yeah, the recruiter's probably going to be mad. The facility's probably going to be mad. So you might have some consequences there. I don't know. You probably won't have any penalties, but as long as you work that notice.
It probably wouldn't look good on you. Or if you just left a job early because another job came up that was better, also probably not going to look good on you. So, ideally, unless it's a really bad situation or a really unethical situation, we try to stick through it. But if it's an emergency, if you became ill or you got hurt or your family member became ill and you needed to go back home, that is completely different. And that everyone, if you had to tell that story in court or to your next employer or 10 years down the line to defend yourself, anyone and everyone who's reasonable is going to understand that type of situation.
There's a lot of nuance, but if you have a justification, then there's not going to be any repercussions for the most part. But if you're doing it just because or something better came up, then there probably will be some kind of backlash if from the company and from the facility. But yeah, try to avoid that.
Okay, we have two other sort of big questions that kind of have a lot that go into them that we're going to go through. If you guys are tuning in still and have any further questions that we haven't answered, this is a live Q&A, so feel free to comment if you have any other burning questions, random, anything about travel therapy, or if you are watching later on the replay and you want to ask us any questions, feel free to ask in the comments.
Yeah, we always go back to these old videos. I think we've got almost 30 videos now. We've been doing this for like 30 straight weeks, which is crazy.
Yeah.
We plan to keep going for a while, but yeah, we always go back to the old videos and answer any questions that come up, and we get notified of those. So if anyone's watching this in the future and has any questions, definitely feel free to ask, and we'll contact you or reply to your question.
Yeah, but we got two more we want to go over. So one of them is about student loans. So that's a huge question on a lot of people's minds is repaying your student loans, or some people want to know about student loan forgiveness, which Jared has written several very informative articles about. So if you guys want to know in more detail about student loan forgiveness options, why you might pursue an income-driven repayment, the difference between the different types, we have a lot of articles on that. But this person specifically wanted to know, can you explain the pay-as-you-earn program, the student loan forgiveness or student loan income-driven repayment plan, the pay-as-you-earn plan? They wanted to know, how does the interest rate work and how do the payments work? And then I want to go into, if we're already going to talk about pay-as-you-earn, we might as well talk about that versus the revised pay-as-you-earn.
Yep. Okay, so pay-as-you-earn and revised pay-as-you-earn are pretty similar. I guess the big differences are pay-as-you-earn, you get loan forgiveness after 20 years of making eligible payments each month. Revised pay-as-you-earn, you get loan forgiveness after either 20 or 25 years, depending on whether you went to graduate school or not. So almost everybody watching this video is going to be basically, they went to grad school, so you're probably going to have 25 years of payments before the loans are forgiven. So for a lot of people, it makes sense to go with pay-as-you-earn, but it just depends on the situation. So what was it? Payments? So the way the payments work are the same for both programs. It's based on a percentage of your discretionary income, which basically they take like the federal poverty line for your household size and I think double it. And then anything over that is discretionary income. I think that's how it works. And so I think it's discretionary income plus 10%, or they give you a 10% cushion or something like that. And then everything over that is what the payment's based on. So the payment is the same for both pay-as-you-earn or repay. The difference with what I always talk about, the interest rates, so pay-as-you-earn, you'll just pay your normal interest rate. If your payment doesn't cover the total interest, then your interest is going to accumulate each month. Whereas on the revised pay-as-you-earn, the payment that you're making, if it doesn't cover the full interest payment or the full interest accumulating each month, then half of the remaining amount that would be added to the loan balance is forgiven. It's subsidized. And then that other half is added to the balance. So say you're accumulating $600 in interest a month, your payment is $100. On pay-as-you-earn, that 100 would offset 100 of that 600, so the 500 left over would be added onto your loan balance. Revised pay-as-you-earn, that 100 would offset 100 of the 600, but instead of that full 500, 250 would be added to the loan balance. Does that make sense?
Nope. It all confuses me. I think it's really easiest to look at this stuff in written form. I think it's really easiest to look at it in article form, and we have a lot of articles on it. I think you can also run through, I'm sure it gives descriptions on the studentloan.gov website, as well as I know that aren't there tools on there where you can run through different scenarios of how
there's a tool where you can enter your income, enter your loan balance, enter your interest rate, and it'll tell you what you would pay over time on each of the options. And then, I would definitely check out some of the articles I wrote about that, comparing the two. I think that probably will be easier to read and look at some actual numbers instead of just hear me explain it. But hopefully that helps some.
Lauren, I think it was Lauren that asked that question. So if you have further questions, let us know if we did answer that well or not. If not, we can chat later. We can message you more. So the last question or kind of bundle of questions that we got were about tax homes. So if any of you guys are still tuning in, I know this video is getting long. or if you're watching it on the replay, this is one part you're going to want to hear about. So this is something important for everybody who's going to be a travel therapist or who is a travel therapist needs to understand. We had a comment here from Lena. Lena says, thanks for all the wisdom. I would not be as prepared for this without your guidance. I finally got my California license and I'm gearing up to go. Congratulations, Lena.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Super exciting.
California, we still haven't, we've never been, or I've never been to California. Whitney's been to Southern California, but I cannot wait to go explore there. It looks beautiful.
Yeah. So congratulations, Lena, and we are super glad that we could provide some wisdom and help you along the way. So like I was saying with tax homes, it's very important that you understand the concept of a tax home and whether or not you are going to be maintaining one or not. So let's just start with what is a tax home.
The tax home is basically your primary place of residence. So as a travel therapist, you are traveling away from home. The reason that we get stipends is because we are paying duplicate expenses. So when you're traveling, you will have a permanent residence where you would go back to between assignments, and then you would have your travel assignment location where you're paying rent at as well. So you're basically duplicating rent in both places and utilities or whatever. So that's why you get that housing stipend. So your tax home is that home location for you. So basically, where's the place that you would go if you couldn't find a job for a month? That's almost always going to be your tax home, right? If you had a month between assignments, you couldn't find a job, where would you go back to? That would be your tax home.
So the reason why this is important is a lot of people think, oh, you just make more money as a traveler. And a lot of us, especially if we are coming out right out of school and going into being travel therapists, maybe we had an apartment during school, but now our lease is up and we don't have that anymore. And sure, we keep some stuff at our parents' house, but like we don't really pay to live there because it's just our parents' house. Like we just keep some stuff there and we might go back and visit mom and dad now and again, but we don't really have a home. Well, if you choose to travel that way and you choose not to maintain a tax home, you technically have to get all of your pay taxed. You would be what they call an itinerant employee. The word itinerant means a traveler or kind of like a gypsy.
Nomad.
A nomad. You just move around and you don't have a home base where you legally pay taxes or pay some type of expenses.
So in that scenario, all your pay would be taxed, which means that you're going to bring home less money per week.
Mm-hmm. So, understanding, what can you do for a tax home if you are one of these people who doesn't necessarily have, a house or a mortgage or an apartment. It's easy for those people because those people that are, say they already have a full house and a mortgage and they've had a permanent career and then they decide to go travel but they still have their house to come back to.
Yeah,
well,
it's very clear cut there.
Very clear cut. You've lived there a while, you have payments, you have a mortgage, you have bills. Very clear cut. Or if you plan to maintain, say you're a married couple, even though you're young, you still have your apartment that you've lived in the past couple of years and you're going to keep that apartment there and you're going to keep paying your bills and things. Pretty clear cut there too. Now, if you want to use your parents' home, you do need to pay them and you do need to have a lease with them to make it legal. You can't just say, oh, I keep my parents' home, that's my tax home. It has to be, more...
It's more than just an address. Some
right.
recruiters will just be like, do you have any address where family lives? Just write it here. And then that's not what it is. So if you were ever audited, that doesn't hold up at all. So you need to have somewhere that you're paying living expenses. Because, like I said, you need to realize that the only reason that we get these tax-free stipends is because in the eyes of the
government,
the IRS, we are traveling away from home. So we have a home and we're going away from home to do business, right? That's what our travel summit is that's our business location. It would be the same as if we were...
I like to use the pilot example.
Or like a construction worker or, sometimes like if there's a big hurricane or something and people have to go from one state to work on power lines in another state, like that kind of situation. They would be put in a hotel or they'd be given a stipend for housing and food and all that. That's the same situation for us. So you have to have a home location. So just make sure that you have that nailed down, you have a residence, you paying rent somewhere, you have a lease somewhere, all those things.
Yeah, so the best resource to find out more information, we have an article that we wrote to kind of summarize all this, but the best resource to go to is called traveltax.com. They're a group of tax professionals that specialize in working with the traveling employee, not just travel therapists. They work with other traveling professionals. But basically, there's 3 main rules that they have on their website. 1, that you're duplicating expenses. 2, that you don't abandon your home, your tax home, which means you return to it a reasonable amount of time throughout the year. And the third thing is that you maintain some sort of business in the area, which could mean that you work there, like maybe you have a part-time job there, or you did have a part-time job there, or that you keep your car registered there and you get your, your voter registration there and all that kind of stuff.
Bank accounts, and if you have like any kind of real estate or storage units or that kind of stuff really ties you to an area.
Right. Now somebody asks, is it true that you have to return home 30 days out of the year? So again, it's kind of vague. It's kind of a gray area. So the rule just says you cannot abandon your tax home. On Travel Tax's website, they recommend as a general guideline 30 days within a year or 60 days within 2 years. That's their guideline.
Yeah. And that guideline is based on prior cases of where someone was taken to court or they had to go through some kind of litigation for being in violation of tax law, or it was in question whether they were actually travelers or they were actually traveling away from home, and those kind of situations. Mm-hmm. So the rulings of those cases are kind of build the guidelines that we follow.
Right. And so what can you do to prove that you went home 30 days a year? Some people say to maintain receipts, gas receipts, or a plane ticket, or whatever it is to show that you were there. But the really important thing is just make sure you're not working in Hawaii 365 days a year and home is in Virginia. It's like, when did you go home to Virginia?
Yeah. If I was just starting out, we didn't know this stuff until probably a year and a half or 2 years into traveling. But if I was just starting out now, I would keep receipts of every time, or at least keep the credit card or bank statement showing that you made purchases in that area while you were at home, just so that you have some kind of proof. But that's easy to do if you keep up with it each year and you just file that away, or you take pictures of the receipts or something like that. It's not hard to do. So that's what I would do if I could go back now.
Yeah. And then there was an interesting follow-up question that I never really thought about. Somebody said, what do you do if you and the person you're traveling with have different home states or different tax homes? So this would just make it trickier as a travel pair, because you would need to take additional time off, or say you guys are working in Kansas and one of you's tax home is in Virginia and the other one's in Florida. Like maybe you just go your separate way and you go spend your 30 days in your 30 days, or it's 2 weeks here and 2 weeks there.
Yeah.
Or you just need to take additional time off so you guys both have an opportunity to...
Yeah, you took 60 days off and you spend 30 in each. That would work.
Yeah.
But
or move your tax home.
Yeah.
So move your tax home. You guys could combine your tax home and get an apartment that it's both going to be both your tax home, or switch to both using the one mom's house or whatever.
Yeah, sometimes it's a hassle, but sometimes it's worth it too. If you say you're paying rent for 2 different home locations, if you can combine those things and pay half each, then sometimes it works out better.
Yeah, so you would just have to finagle some way to make that happen.
Yeah.
So that's actually all the questions that we have. So if you guys are tuning in still...
I think those are the longest video ever.
Yeah, if you guys are still tuning in, or you're tuning in later, please comment if you have additional questions. If you would like to know more, you feel free to message us directly if you want to ask more specific questions too. We can link to some videos in the past and some articles in the past that touched on a lot of these topics. But this was fun. We just sort of did a mishmash of different topics. So.
Yep. If you guys could like this video, that would be awesome. Tag a friend that might be interested in travel, and some of these questions could be helpful. Feel free to ask any questions in the future.
Yeah, and if you guys need any recommendations, I know one thing we talked about in the beginning of the video was the travel companies and recruiters that we work with. So if you guys want recommendations on that, feel free to message us or just comment on the video and let us know. Yep.
So next week, we'll plan on doing another Sunday video as long as our Wi-Fi and everything works out okay. We are going to be pretty sure we're going to be in Germany. I think we're going to be in Hamburg, Germany, yeah. I think, because tomorrow we're leaving for Amsterdam. We'll be there for 5 days, and then from there we're going to Germany. So we should be in Germany, but we'll see what happens. And but thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Bye.